about that. But hey, you know what? Thank goodness there are 60 more weeks to go in the regular season because I got a whole lot of making up to do. So, in the meantime, let's just share the screen and pull up the schedule to see what we're working with here. We got a lot of contested matchups. We got a few games that I think are going to be blowouts, but we'll get into all of it. Let's start with tomorrow night's matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. Buffalo's 2-0 and Miami is 0-2 because that's right. Tua Tagovailoa finally lost to the New England Patriots. That was a game that they easily could have won. I mean, they were up 27-23 in the fourth quarter, and the biggest reason why, in my opinion, was because of the offense in the second half. They just couldn't, make the plays to, you know, pull away. They got off to a horrible start. They were down 12-0. That really should have been 14-0 if Anders Borealis, yeah, I'm going to go with that, missed two extra points. The first two extra points of the game, Miami's offense was able to fight back with a couple touchdown drives to make it a 1-point game. They only trailed 15-14. They ended up taking a couple leads in the second half, but the bottom line was they could have reached the end zone in the second half. The only touchdown that they scored was off a punt return from Malik Washington, and then literally right after, Antonio Gibson fields a kickoff from the 10-yard line and takes it 90 yards down the right sideline to the house, and actually ran just as fast as Mike Vrabel did on the sideline to score the go-ahead touchdown. And really, the Patriots offense, they didn't play that great of a second half either, but at the same time, they actually managed to march down the field in the middle, not even in the middle, in the beginning of the fourth quarter, and took the lead and got the touchdown that they needed to really take momentum. So that's what it really came down to. New England's offense showed up when it mattered, and Miami, while it did their best to move the ball, they couldn't close the deal. Tua threw an interception to Marte Mapu that pretty much put it under wraps. And on their final drive of the game, Devon Achane was nearly the hero by scoring a 53-yard touchdown, but his foot stepped out of bounds, so it was 1st and 10 at, I want to say, around the 48-yard line, and Milton Williams came through with a huge sack to officially wrap it up and put the icing on the cake. Tua got sacked 5 times, only scored 6 points in the second half offensively, and the bottom line was that, like I said, they just couldn't close on their chances. And, New England just made a few more plays in the end. That's all it came down to. The Bills, on the other hand, absolutely demolished the New York Jets, 30-10. Josh Allen threw for 148 yards, and it didn't even matter because, Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, decided to have a more heavy run game plan in which James Cook ended up going nuts. He ended up running for over 130 yards, if I'm not mistaken. Let me pull up my notes here. Something around there. Hold on. I got a little bit sidetracked here. Yeah, so he ran for 132 yards. They ran for over 200 throughout the entire day. Jets offense went 0 for 11 on third down. They only had 154 yards passing, and before suffering a concussion in the second half, Justin Fields only completed 3 out of 11 passes for 27 yards, and the only touchdown that they scored came at garbage time. Pretty much Buffalo's game plan from the start was to shut down the run, to take away Breece Hall, and that's exactly what they did. He only ran for 29 yards on 10 carries, and, the Buffalo Bills, they were absolutely dominant in the trenches, which is why they won the time of possession 38-22. So definitely not the most convincing victory, but at the same time, when your quarterback gets his nose busted and he's still able to finish the game and win it 30-10, and the offense is still able to, get into a really solid groove, even with the backups in, there was just really nothing that the Jets could have done to win that game. So Buffalo just proved that they are the more dominant team in the division by far. And, like I said, it wasn't perfect, but at the end of the day, it was well more than enough to win. So for that, I'm going with the Bills to win this game, and it's probably going to be a blowout because if you look at how the Dolphins have been over the first 2 weeks, they have been absolutely horrible. Their defense is decimated. Their offense looks lifeless. Tua's decision-making has been a big reason why they are in the situation that they're in right now. And if they keep continuing to fall off this downward spiral, then I don't even know if Mike McDaniel can make it to week 5. That's how bad this is right now. The same goes for general manager Chris Greer because, yikes, this team just does not have anything right now. I mean, the first 2 years, you could say, well, they haven't been able to beat dominant opponents and they struggle in the cold, but, they still have, the makings of a strong playoff team. Now, it's just It's just absolutely horrible. It's like watching the Dolphins in 2021 when they just got off to that horrific start, yet all of a sudden just managed to run the table down the stretch because they were able to beat a weak bunch of weak opponents. So Bills are at home. They got the better quarterback. They have a way better coaching staff. Their defense is more dominant. And at the end of the day, it really just comes down to which team is going to have more composure, which is going to have more poise and the more mental toughness. And right now, I can't say that the Dolphins have that right now. So give me the Bills here, 31-10. Bills will start the year 3-0, and Miami 0-3. Yikes. All right, moving on. Let's get to this next game here. We got the Green Bay Packers taking on the Cleveland Browns. And I know what a lot of people are thinking. Okay, this is probably going to be a blowout. This shouldn't be close by any means. But something tells me that this is going to be a little bit of a trap game. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game than people think. But when you look at how both of these teams played last week, you would think, Collin, you're absolutely ridiculous. Why in the world do you think this is going to be close? And rightfully so, because the Browns got absolutely destroyed, 41-17. Joe Flacco did not look great in his return to Baltimore. He ended up getting benched for Dillon Gabriel on the final drive, and they were down 41-10 when that happened. Joe Flacco throughout the day, let me pull up my notes here. He only threw for 199 yards on 25 of 45 passing. Turned the ball over twice, which included an interception that really opened the floodgates, and then coughed the ball up on a strip sack that officially put the game away 34-10 in the middle of the third quarter. So that was nowhere near a contest at any point. Actually, they were only down by 7 at one point in the first half, but then, just the turnovers were absolutely killers. The offense needed to show up, and that couldn't happen, even though their defense did shut down Derrick Henry. So Grant Delpit is somewhat, let off the hook because the Browns' rush defense is absolutely fantastic. They've given up the fewest rush yards through 2 weeks. And when you look at the Green Bay Packers, Josh Jacobs, he's been okay. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been completely shut down, but if the Packers can't run the ball, they might not score more than 24 points this game because their offense is really bagged up right now. They don't have Jaden Reed. They didn't have 2 of their starting O-linemen in Zach Tom and Aaron Banks. Both of them were able to return to practice last week, which is a positive sign, but their statuses remain unclear. And now you're going up against not just the best rush defense in the league, but one of the best edge rushers that is currently leading the league in sacks in Myles Garrett. So really, this is not only going to come down to how Josh Jacobs is going to handle the rock, but how Jordan Love is going to play. So far through 2 weeks, he's been really efficient. He's 4th in the league in passer rating. He hasn't turned the ball over once. He's thrown 4 touchdown passes to 0 interceptions. He's top 10 in passing yards. So we know that Jordan Love is capable of having a strong game, but you just really need to see it for it to actually happen. So that's why I'm picking the Packers to win this game, because I think it'll be a tightly contested defensive struggle. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to which offense is eventually going to find, going to get into a groove, which is going to find a rhythm when it matters, and, who's going to step up when, it really comes down to the nitty gritty. And I just trust Joe. I trust Jordan Love to do that more than I do with Joe Flacco, given the personnel around them. I know Jaden Reed is out, but Matthew Golden needs to step up. So does Romeo Doubs. And, you got an outstanding security blanket in Tucker Kraft to step up in the passing game. So give me the Packers to win this game 24-20. And with that, we'll move on to an AFC South Division rivalry matchup between the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans. Before the season started, I really thought that, it could have gone either way because I just had no expectations for the Indianapolis Colts or the Tennessee Titans whatsoever. But now we're in a little bit of a different predicament. The Colts, as you see, are 2-0, and the Titans are 0-2. Oh, boy. So let's start with the Colts. Let's get on to the happy side of things here. Daniel Jones has been absolutely terrific. He's 2nd in passing yards right now. He's only been sacked twice. He hasn't turned the ball over. And more importantly, that Colts offense hasn't even punted through 2 weeks. Just last week, they were able to do something that I didn't think they were going to be able to do. They beat the Denver Broncos off a walk-off field goal on a game-winning drive. They won a game where it was impressive, where the Broncos defense, that's a group that you need to beat to really gain that respectability and to assert yourself as a respected playoff contender. I know that their offense didn't score a touchdown in the second half. They relied they relied on 3 field goals from Spencer Schrader to, get those 9 points in that period. Yet at the same time, one thing that they did that, Bo Nix couldn't was make the least amount of mistakes. You know, when you watch that game, it was Denver's to lose. Their offense was absolutely unstoppable through the first, maybe 35 to 40 minutes. Bo Nix threw 3 touchdown passes. Yeah, they did stall out a couple times, but listen, they were as efficient as they could have asked for. Anytime that Indianapolis scored, they responded with a scoring drive of their own. And when the Colts couldn't convert on 4th down at midfield multiple times, all Denver had to do was just get a few more points on the board, and that would have been it. But instead, Bo Nix threw just a horrible interception that was way high and behind Courtland Sutton. It landed right in the arms of Cam Bynum, shades of last week against Tua and Tyreek Hill when they absolutely demolished the Miami Dolphins 33-8. And all of a sudden, the Indianapolis Colts get the momentum they need. They kick a field goal on their next drive, but it wasn't like Denver's offense was completely shut down. They managed to get right back into field goal range, but they had to settle for a 46-yard attempt. And right on cue, Will Lutz doinks it off the crossbar. And Indianapolis has plenty of time to get into field goal range and set up a makeable field goal attempt for Spencer Schrader. Yet, all of a sudden, they don't put the ball in Daniel Jones's hands. And instead, they play way too conservative by just trying to force the ball to Jonathan Taylor and hope to God that he, gets the yardage they need to get into field goal range. I get it. Put the ball in the hands of your best player because he did total over 200 yards at that point. But with the way the clock was running down and the fact that Denver was loading up the box and Indianapolis was still trying to do their best to just run the football, I did not like the way that Shane Steichen was managing the game clock. And with only 5 seconds left, they go for a 60-yard field goal, and it predictably missed. And I thought, okay, so Denver's going to get bailed out by their own incompetence off a 60-yard attempt. And then the penalty flag gets thrown for defensive leverage. And whether or not you want to agree with that call, I personally thought it was the right decision. But then again, it was one of those plays where it could have gone either way. But nonetheless, Denver gets flagged, and the ball gets moved an extra 15 yards. And Spencer Schrader made the game-winning field goal to bench victorious 29-28. So Indianapolis is undefeated. They're leading the AFC South, which is something that I did not expect whatsoever. But the Tennessee Titans are just absolutely in shambles right now. They got absolutely wrecked 33-19. But at one point, they were up 3 at halftime and up 16-13 midway through the second half. And then right on schedule, he gets strip sacked by Byron Young, if I'm not mistaken. And that was exactly what, the Rams needed to just pull away and, absolutely dominate the game the rest of the way. So Matthew Stafford of the Rams offense had a more efficient performance than they did last week against the Houston Texans. Puka Nacua was sensational. Devontae Adams had over 100 yards. Blake Corum and Kyron Williams showed flashes of, the dangerous running back tandem that they could be throughout the season. And more importantly, their defense has been absolutely incredible. I know that it's a small sample size and that they went up against, 2 pretty bad offenses against Houston and Tennessee, but heading into their game against Philadelphia, I'm not sure. I feel like the Rams could definitely pull off an upset here, but more on that later. Having said all of that, I think the Indianapolis Colts are just going to win this in a blowout. I mean, Cam Ward is good. He's showing a lot of positive flashes, yet he just has no help around him. He's already got sacked 11 times through 2 weeks. That's by far the most in the National Football League. The only guy that's closest to that is J.J. McCarthy with 9, who just got sacked 6 times against Atlanta, but we'll get into that in a few moments. Indianapolis right now, they got an outstanding defense. They lead the league in takeaways. They only have a few sacks, but they're going up against one of the worst offensive lines in the league. So I think Lou Anarumo's defense is in for a big afternoon. But more importantly, I think their offense is really going to set the tone from start to finish. Jonathan Taylor is absolutely incredible. He's going up against the 4th worst rushing defense in the league. Tennessee's defense, I know that, they can't be blamed too much for, how the season has gone. But at the same time, they're incredibly undisciplined. They lead the league in penalties. And anytime that, they're on the field too long, they just give up and they tap out and they wear down. So really, it's going to require a perfect game on all 3 faces for the Titans to even have a chance. But I just think the Indianapolis Colts, they're roster is better constructed, and I don't think that this is going to be close. So I'm going to pick the Colts to win 34-16 here, and stay undefeated while the Tennessee Titans fall to 0-3. Moving on. Oh, this is going to be interesting. The Minnesota Vikings versus the Cincinnati Bengals. We thought that this would be an outstanding quarterback matchup between Joe Burrow and J.J. McCarthy, but instead, each of those quarterbacks are not going to play due to sustained injuries. Joe Burrow is going to miss 3 months with a turf toe. J.J. McCarthy will be out for the next few weeks with a high ankle sprain. So we have Jake Browning versus Carson Wentz. What a time to be alive. Cincinnati is 2-0, which is a very rare position to be in. I don't think they've been 2-0 since 2018 with Andy Dalton and Marvin Lewis, which is just mind-boggling when you think about it. Jake Browning did more than his job to win the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, led an outstanding 92-yard game-winning drive to, seal the deal and, win the game. But he did throw 3 interceptions against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was a very up and down performance. One drive, they were absolutely terrific. T. Higgins is breaking tackles. Jamar Chase is absolutely, going off. He had 14 catches for 167 yards. And then other times, he's single-handedly keeping the Jacksonville Jaguars in this game. And to be quite honest, this was a game that the Jaguars should have won when they had the chance. But on their final drive, well, really on the drive before their last one, it got to 4th and 5 at their 7-yard line, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was 4th and 5 at their 7, right? Yeah, 4th and 5 at the 7-yard line. They're up 27-24, and really all you need to do is just to kick a field goal to take the lead, or not even to take the lead, but to increase their lead to 6. And instead, the offense stays out on the football field. Trevor Lawrence has the ball snapped. Brian Thomas is actually wide open on the left side. Trevor Lawrence throws the ball his way, and it falls out of his hands. And it's incomplete, and a turnover on downs. And that is just the spark that Jake Browning needed to put the team on his back and pull off another game-winning drive. I think that's actually his 3rd since 2023 when he took over for Joe Burrow that time because he was out with a season-ending wrist injury. But Jacksonville, they just let so many winnable chances fall out of their hands. I know that they were up 17-10 at one point at halftime, and that, their offense had, more explosion and more, promise than they did the week before. But at the same time, Trevor Lawrence threw 2 interceptions, and anytime that they were in position to, put the game away, they just failed and came up short. And they gave the Bengals the breathing room that they needed to, break Jacksonville's hearts once again. So Minnesota, on the other hand, they got absolutely shredded and wrecked apart by the Atlanta Falcons. Defensively, you can't even blame them too much because through the first 55 minutes or so, they didn't even give up a touchdown. It took 5 field goals from Parker Romo, the kicker that Atlanta elevated on the active roster because Yahweh Ku's confidence is absolutely destroyed at this point. It took 5 field goals from Parker Romo to score the first 15 points of the game. And at one point, it's only a 1-score game in the 4th quarter. Minnesota's offense could not score a freaking touchdown throughout the entire night. In the first half, when they got into scoring range, they just couldn't catch it in the end zone. And in the second half, they just got absolutely shut down. They couldn't score any points. J.J. McCarthy was absolutely wrecked in the pocket. He got sacked 6 times. He threw 2 interceptions. Atlanta's defense, or I should say Minnesota's defense, eventually tapped out. They gave up a walk-in touchdown to put the dagger in 22-6. And it was only fitting that the game ended on a fumble recovery off a muff punt. So now that Jake Browning and Carson Wentz are the starting quarterbacks, I honestly really don't know what to expect. It's more uncertain in this game than it actually was with the 49ers and Saints game because at least with that one, you can say, well, San Francisco, they got Christian McCaffrey. They still have Kyle Shanahan, an outstanding defense. They would do more than enough to win the game. This one, I don't really know what to expect because both of them have the talent. They got 2 of the best receivers in the league, bar none. Their offenses have so much talent and skill level. Their defenses are opportunistic. You just really don't know what you're going to get from the quarterbacks. Jake Browning, the last time he played against the Vikings, he was absolutely incredible. The offense showed up. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase were, absolutely sensational, and they won 27-24 in overtime. But this game is in Minnesota now. When you look at the history between these two teams, the Vikings have not lost a home game to the Bengals ever. Ever. Actually, I think the last time that, they played against each other was 2017 when Case Keenum beat Andy Dalton 34-7. But then again, both teams are absolutely different. Are a lot more different now than they were in 2017. So I think that the Vikings can keep that streak alive. I just really, to me, it could really go either way because, like I said, the quarterback matchup is what it is. But I just trust Minnesota's defense to, play more aggressive, to get off to a hot start. I know that they're going to get some players back from injury. Christian Darrisaw was a full participant in practice on the offensive line. Let's see if Andrew Van Ginkel is able to play. Harrison Smith, he was able to return to the lineup week 2. But in my mind, Minnesota's defense is one of the best in the league. They can absolutely shut down any offense that they go up against. It just really comes down to, what their offense can do and how they can get off to a fast start. Because over the last 2 weeks, they have not done that thus far. They've only won one quarter, which is why they were able to beat the Chicago Bears. But in the remaining 7 quarters, they've done absolutely nothing. So they need to get off to a hot start fast. And against this Bengals defense, I think that they have a good chance of succeeding. It really just comes down to, whether or not Carson Wentz can, do what he can to, will the team to victory. So as for a final score, I haven't really thought about it, but I don't think it'll be a blowout like it was in 2017, but I think it'll be low scoring once again. And at the end of the day, like I said, just comes down to, which quarterback can save the day. So I'll say the Vikings win 23-20. Not as high scoring of a game as it was, the last 2 meetings, but I'll still think that it's a competitive grudge match. So wouldn't be too surprised if Jake Browning pulled out the upset, but then again, they are on the road. So not all the odds are in their favor. So, all right, moving on. Enough rambling. The New England Patriots versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin has not won a regular season game in Foxborough since 2008 when they beat Matt Castle and company. And both teams are are coming off pretty different performances. The Steelers got shut down and they did not show up in their home opener against the Seattle Seahawks. The offense could not do anything whatsoever. I mean, the only touchdown that they scored was because they only had to move the ball 20 yards down the field because Sam Darnold threw 2 interceptions. They could not do anything in the second half. Aaron Rodgers threw 2 interceptions and only settled for 3 more points. The defense got absolutely obliterated by Darnold, especially in the second half. They got picked apart on drive after drive after drive. Jalen Ramsey had no answers for Jackson Smith and Jigba. Kenneth Walker ran for 100 yards. They eventually gave up the 2 touchdowns that they couldn't afford to put the game away. And to top it all off, on the special teams side of things, Caleb Johnson in the 3rd quarter lets the kickoff go right through his hands, does not even try to go for the football. It rolls into the end zone, and Seattle smartly chased down the ball to recover it in the end zone for a touchdown. That put them ahead by 10 points, and really that just opened up the floodgates for them because Pittsburgh just had no answers whatsoever. Yeah, they kicked a field goal to make it a 1-score game, but at that point, their offense was in better sync. The defense did what the defense buckled down and really squeezed the field. Jalen Warren was really the only source of offense that Pittsburgh had, and the Steelers, they just got outplayed. And as for the Patriots, I already talked about it. They finally managed to win a game in Miami. They finally beat Tua. And fun fact, Mike Vrabel is still undefeated against that quarterback. So there is one trend that I did not take into account. But Patriots did absolutely everything you could have asked them to on all 3 faces. Drake May was incredible. He had 137. He had 137 passer rating. Ramondre Stevenson had an outstanding performance, probably the best that I've seen in so long. Punished defenders, through his powerful run. Had a huge 55-yard catch and run that really turned things around in the second half. Antonio Gibson, in the special team side of things, had a 90-yard kickoff return touchdown just one play after Malik Washington gave them the lead in the 4th quarter off a punt return score himself. So right on schedule in the clutch after missing 2 extra points. Anders Borealis makes a 53-yard field goal to go ahead by 6 instead of missing it that would have set the Dolphins in tremendous field position. And being quite honest, if that field goal does not go through, then there's no doubt that I think the Dolphins are going to kick a field goal to send the game into overtime at the very least. And I don't know if the Patriots are going to be able to win if that goes into extra regulation. So bottom line was Pittsburgh did not show up while the Patriots played the exact opposite. And entering this game at Gillette Stadium, the Patriots are going to wear the old throwback uniforms. So I'm looking forward to it. I know that a lot of nostalgic fans are excited for this one, but I know more people are going to favor the Steelers to win because they do have the quote-unquote better quarterback. They have the better coaching staff. Their defense is more feared, but I like the Patriots in this one. Aaron Rodgers has not won a game at Gillette Stadium. The Patriots have not lost to the Steelers at home since 2008, and I know that some historical trends don't really mean anything in the long run, but at the same time, when I just look at the roster construction of both teams here, they're not completely too far apart. The offenses have a lot to prove. The defenses are going to be the backbone. Yet, I think it's just going to come down to, which team is going to be more mentally prepared. The Patriots lead the league in sacks. The Steelers defense, while it does have the better players, TJ Watt, Jalen Ramsey, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, Darius Slade, Joey Porter Jr., Patrick Queen, they have not been great over the first 2 weeks. They gave up 32 points to Justin Fields, and they just gave up 31 to Sam Darnold. Well, really 24 if you really think about it because of the special teams whiff. But bottom line is that Steelers defense has not lived up to its standards. And I think, while the Patriots have a lot of things that they need to work on themselves, I think that they're slowly getting better. And I think that this is the game that, will truly prove that, they're not messing around. If they start off 1-3 though, or 1-2 again, then I'm just gonna groan and shake my head in disgust because it's like it'll just prove that just when you think things are gonna turn around, then they just fall right back into ineptitude. But I'm gonna give the Patriots a chance here, and I like their odds. So give me the Patriots to win. Let's say 24-17. Think it could be a pretty competitive, low-scoring battle here. So we'll see what happens in that one. Now we get to the Eagles versus the Rams, a playoff rematch between two hated NFC foes. Already talked about the Rams. They handled their business on the road against the Tennessee Titans, but Philly is coming off a 20-17 victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. A pretty ugly one, so to speak. Not as bad as the Super Bowl one, but a little bit of a more defensive oriented focus. Jalen Hurts only threw for 101 yards. AJ Brown only got targeted more times than he did last week. Caught 5 passes, but in the second half didn't catch a single pass. And really the bottom line was they only won because of 3 things. Defense, number 1, they only held Patrick Mahomes to 17 points. That Chiefs offense is absolutely lifeless right now. Number 2 is because of Saquon Barkley. He really controlled the line of scrimmage. He was the biggest reason why the Eagles were able to win the time of possession. And number 3 was because of the tush push. Philadelphia ran that play a lot. I think to my count, they ran it about 5 or 6 different times. Could have been a lot more because, the Chiefs defense really put themselves into a lot of third and short situations, and they knew they couldn't afford to. Defense played outstanding. I think, the Chiefs, they had a chance to, waltz right down the field, down 13-10, punch the ball in the end zone to go 17-13. But on a simple slant pass to Travis Kelce, the ball falls right out of his hands. It gets picked up by Andrew Makupa, and Philadelphia goes ahead 20-10. Actually, when you think about it, all the miscues that the Chiefs had that day, Philadelphia was able to score off of them. There was the 58-yard missed field goal that allowed the Eagles to, go ahead 3-0. There was the interception that, landed right out of the hands of Travis Kelce, and Philadelphia was able to score off of that one. And yeah, Patrick Mahomes used his legs to go ahead 10-7, but when you look at the passing game, there's just nothing else. Nothing. I mean, Travis Kelce looks incredibly washed up. Hollywood Brown has more than proven that he is nowhere near a number one receiver, like he couldn't do in Arizona or in Baltimore. Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice are still out, and those are really the only two sources of offense that you really need to make sure that this offense has any sort of life. They can't run the freaking ball, even though you have Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. The offensive line, they haven't given up a whole lot of sacks, which is great, but they're still incredibly undisciplined, especially on the right side, a la Jawan Taylor. And the defense is, very shaky and vulnerable when you really think about it. But I know I'm kind of digressing here. I know this is about the Eagles, but Philadelphia was just able to take advantage of a lot of sloppy football. And while their offense wasn't great, they just made the least amount of mistakes. So I think entering this playoff rematch, I think we're in for one hell of a dogfight. Saquon Barkley absolutely torched them in their last two meetings. So I think that is what's going to keep Philadelphia alive in this game. But I got to be honest, I like the Rams' chances to pull off this upset here. Their defense has been absolutely incredible. And again, I know that their defense has, gone up against two vastly inferior opponents. So this is as big of a test as you could ask for on their side of things. But I mean, their offense is efficient. They have the pieces to really put this Eagles defense on its heels, especially if, Matthew Stafford is able to hold on to the ball the way that, the Chiefs offense couldn't. And I know that this is on the road, but Philadelphia Eagles proved that they are nowhere near the same team this year that they were the last. So I think it'll be a low-scoring game. I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles stayed undefeated, but at the same time, I do not like their passing game right now. They just look awful. A.J. Brown is not getting involved. Devontae Smith shows up in spurts, but that's just about it. And Jalen Hurts, he only threw for 101 yards last week, and he finished with 152 yards against the Cowboys. That's not going to cut it against this Rams defense, especially with that front seven. So I'm going to pick the Rams to win this game 20-17. And with that, let's move on to a little bit more of a less predictable game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New York Jets. Tampa Bay, they were able to win another, they were able to beat the Houston Texans off another game-winning drive, the second time in 2 weeks where that's been able to happen. They were up 14-10 after the first four drives. Then both offenses fell into quicksand. Neither offensive line could block. Tampa's you could kind of excuse more because you got Grant Barton playing at left tackle, Ben Breeson playing at center. You don't have Tristan Wirfs. You got Michael Jordan as your left guard. I get it. That offensive line, it's a rotating carousel. Yet the Texans could not take advantage whatsoever for most of the ball game. They are just a horrible football team right now. They can't run the football. Their passing game is just not in sync. The O-line is still as bad of a turnstile. And C.J. Stroud has just fallen off of a cliff since his rookie season. And it's just flat out concerning. Tampa's defense, they were the only reason why they were able to stay in this ball game. You had Chase McLaughlin doink a field goal that gave the Texans some breathing room. There was another huge punt return from Jalen Noel that set up the go-ahead touchdown run for Nick Chubb that put them ahead 19-14. But for the second week in a row, Baker Mayfield put the team on his back. They were able to run the ball extremely well. Rachaad White and Bucky Irving formed into that 1-2 punch that they needed to be to, keep Tampa Bay alive in this game and to, increase their chances of winning. And with 7 seconds left, Rachaad White punched it in to take the lead, and Houston just did not have any time left. So really it was a well-fought defensive battle, and at the end of the day, Tampa's offense, they just showed up in the end. There's nothing else you can really say about it. So Justin Fields is not going to play on Sunday. He's going to be out due to a concussion. They got absolutely blitzed by the Buffalo Bills, 30-10. They couldn't convert on third down. They couldn't reach 200 yards of offense. They couldn't run the football. Their only touchdown came at garbage time. And because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are at home and they get to debut their 68 jerseys, which are absolutely incredible, by the way, I just don't see how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can't win this game by more than 20 points. So I think this is going to be a blowout. I don't really see this as a close contest by any means necessary. Give me the Bucs to win 34-10. 34-10. 34-10. There. Said it a lot better. All right, next up we got the Washington Commanders versus the Las Vegas Raiders. this is going to be a pretty dicey game here, especially because Jaden Daniels is uncertain to play, I should say. He's dealing with the knee sprain, so Marcus Mariota might get the start. Austin Eckler, he unfortunately tore his Achilles, so he is going to be out for the rest of the season. And Dietrich Wise, one of the rotating pass rushers, he's out for the year because of a quad injury. So I think that Washington is already showing that they're nowhere near as exciting or as dynamic as they were the year before. But they're not the only ones in this bit of a predicament because the Las Vegas Raiders could not score a touchdown against the Los Angeles Chargers on Monday Night Football. Geno Smith threw 3 interceptions, one of them on the first pass attempt of the game. And while their defense did their best to try to fight back in the second half, they did let up 2 early touchdown drives for Justin Herbert. And, at the end of the day, it's just it came down to which offense was going to be able to, show up in the clutch and which one was going to be able to persevere and, hold on to the football and not make mistakes. And, the Chargers, while they weren't perfect, especially when it came to running the football, they just, you know, they just didn't make any mistakes. So I think that it could really go either way here. I think, the Commanders, they've won the last 2 to 3 matchups, if I'm not mistaken. So I know that Washington has the advantage here, but without Jaden Daniels, I just don't know how this offense is going to operate. I mean, that they're going to try to do their best to run the football. Raiders defense has done a good job at slowing that down over the last 2 weeks. So against New England and against the Chargers. But I just really, if Geno Smith picks up where he left off last week, then Washington is going to be able to barely escape with a win on their end. So really, man, it could really go either way, in my opinion, when you really think about it. But I'm going to go with the Raiders here. I think that, their offense bounces back. They get into a little bit of a better groove. And I know that Washington has a lot more talent, but if they can't run the football, then their passing game is not going to look that exciting because Terry McLaurin has not had a strong couple of weeks. Deebo Samuel, he's been pretty good, but not great. Not the type of explosive maker that you really wanted to see. And more importantly, their offensive line is not great at all. They gave up 3 sacks to the Giants the first week, gave up 4 to the Packers. They only totaled 11 yards in the first quarter. It took until the fourth quarter to reach the end zone, and it took until the final drive just to reach 200 total yards of offense. So I think that the Raiders, this is a winnable game for the Raiders if they just stay composed, if they stay locked in, and if they don't play the way they did last week. So I'm going to pick the Raiders to win this one 23-13. Now we move on to an NFC South game between the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons. Carolina was down 27-3 at one point to the Arizona Cardinals at halftime. 2 early turnovers from Bryce Young completely opened up the floodgates right away. And in the second half, it was a completely different ball game because Bryce Young scored a touchdown on his first 3 drives, and all of a sudden they're down 27-22 with plenty of time left on the clock. The special teams recovers the onside kick, which puts the Arizona Cardinals even in an even bigger predicament. But to their credit, to their defense's credit, they forced a couple big penalties. They sacked Bryce Young on 4th and 16 to effectively put the game away. And, they were able to survive 27-22. But this is the second week in a row where Arizona barely escaped a win against an inferior opponent by the skin of their teeth. And, they did not really deserve to win that game by any means necessary here. So Carolina, they fought back. Bryce Young still threw for 300 yards with, a few touchdowns. But at the same time, they just put themselves in way too big of a hole to come back out of that one. And we talked about the Falcons offensively. They definitely didn't look perfect, but they ran the ball extremely well. They wore the Vikings defense out in the final minutes, and their defense really carried them from start to finish. 6 sacks, 2 interceptions, a muff punt to win the game. So they were just more fundamentally sound on all 3 phases. And with the Panthers, you just can't really say that right now. So I'm going to pick the Falcons to win this game. I really hope that this isn't a blowout, but I just, the Falcons offense is, they're more dynamic. They're a little more consistent. And more importantly, they don't turn the ball over at the rate that the Carolina Panthers do. So That's really what it comes down to: ball security and minimal mistakes. So I say the Falcons win this one, 27-17. And I'm going through these quickly because I know that I'm definitely stalling here. So now we move on to the Houston Texans versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. We got an AFC South showdown once again, just like the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans. And to be quite honest, I don't really know which direction to head towards. Jaguars are a little bit better than they were last year, but you still need to see a lot more from them. Last week against the Bengals, they had multiple opportunities to close the deal and win the game, but two interceptions from Trevor Lawrence early in the first half were the biggest reason why the Cincinnati Bengals scored 10 points in that period and were able to make it a one-score game at the break. And on 4th and 5 at the 7-yard line, they decide to go for it instead of kicking the field goal. Brian Thomas was wide open on the left side of the field to get at least the first down. I don't think he was going to score, but he at least would have gotten the first down. Ball falls out of his hands. Defense fell apart on the final drive. 92-yard game winner for Jake Browning, and a sack from Trey Hendrickson just effectively put it away. The Houston Texans, on the other end, defensively, they are the least of my concerns, but they do fall apart at the worst possible time. Offense, their offense is just horrible. It's horrible. And I already talked about it a few minutes ago when I was previewing the Bucs game, but I just really don't know if they're going to be able to show up against this Jaguars team. I know that Jacksonville has flaws of their own, but CJ Stroud's regression has been absolutely stunning and dramatic. And you're just like, what in the world ever happened to him? I know that the offensive line is horrible and they can't really run the ball well, and the skill position players. I know he doesn't have the best talent around him to, help him succeed. But when you look at how he was able to, put the team on his back in his rookie year, and to see how he has failed to do that since then, it's giving me Mac Jones vibes, which is saying a lot because I am the Patriots fan here. So because the Jaguars are at home, I think that they have the better odds of winning. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but it's just, I trust their offense to make more plays. Brian Thomas Jr. is dealing with a little bit of a wrist injury, but at the same time, they can run the ball extremely well. It's something that Houston's defense can't really do as well as they can in any other statistical category. And more importantly, if this comes down to like a game-winning drive, I just don't have the full confidence in CJ Stroud the way I did his first season and even last year. So I hate saying this because I like CJ Stroud. It's a real damn shame that I'm saying this right now, but this is the situation that they put themselves in. And I trust Liam Cohen to come up with a more strategic game plan offensively than I do Nick Haley, the Houston offensive coordinator. So give me the Jaguars 27-24. Now we're getting into the 405 slate. We got the Denver Broncos versus the Los Angeles Chargers. And to me, I don't think this is a hard one to pick. I'm going to pick the Chargers here because Justin Herbert is undefeated at home. Didn't have as dynamic of a performance as he did the first week against the Kansas City Chiefs, but was incredibly efficient, threw a couple touchdown passes, didn't turn the ball over, which is something that Geno Smith failed to do. And while he did score 3 points in the second half, they just, they were more sound, they were more, strategic, and at the end of the day, they just capitalized on their chances when they got them, and they didn't turn the ball over. Denver, on the other hand, they fought hard. Bo Nix had a strong game. He threw 3 touchdown passes, but in the fourth quarter, they just could not show up when it mattered. Bo Nix threw an interception that gave Indianapolis the momentum they needed, and a 46-yard field goal that was doinked off the uprights by Will Lutz gifted Indianapolis the chance to win the game, and the leverage penalty just all but sealed it. So I think the Chargers will, be able to survive a pretty tightly contested grudge match. Really, it just comes down to the quarterback for me. Both defenses are going to play extremely hard, but I don't know if you really noticed, but last week against the Indianapolis Colts, that Broncos defense, they got a little bit exposed, especially when it came to Jonathan Taylor. They gave up 205 total yards to him through the entire ball game, and Daniel Jones is now second in the league in passing yards, mainly because he threw for 316 with a couple touchdowns on his end. So they're experiencing a little bit of regression on their end. I know that their pass rush is still strong, but, Chargers have proved that it's not going to be an issue for them whatsoever. So I'm going to pick the Chargers to win 30-20. Now we're really getting into the nitty gritty here. Let's move on to this NFC matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the New Orleans Saints. Seattle played a lot better than it did last week. Yeah, 2 turnovers from Sam Darnold really put them in a bind. They were down 14-7 at halftime, but once they returned to the field, the offense ran the ball better. Sam Darnold was more composed. He put the ball in the best positions possible, and defense really took over. The only reason why they gave up a touchdown was because they got placed at the 20-yard line. Special teams really opened up the floodgates with a fumble recovery in the end zone for the touchdown because of a brain fart by one of the Steelers rookies. Whereas the Saints, they had a strong game against the San Francisco 49ers. Spencer Rattler threw for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, yet 2 things held him back. First off is that their defense got picked apart by Mac Jones. He threw for 279 yards with a few touchdowns of his own. And more importantly, when the Saints had a chance to take the lead for the second week in a row, they failed to do so. Opening drive of the game, they have to settle for a chip shot field goal. It sails wide to the left, and the score is still 0-0. 19-14, midway through the second half, Alvin Kamara catches a screen pass. He gets the ball ripped out. Final drive of the game, 26-21, more than a couple minutes to, pull off an upset. Spencer Rattler gets strip sacked by Bryce Huff, and the 49ers recover it. The same way that they were able to beat the Seahawks last week, but we'll get into that in just a few minutes. At the end of the day here, Spencer Rattler has still yet to win a game as a starter, and I don't know if that's going to come anytime soon against a really good Seahawks defense with an offense that, still has a lot of things that they really need to address. They still have to find their identity, but against a team like the New Orleans Saints, I don't expect Sam Darnold to completely wet the bed and revert back to his seeing ghost days. So I think the Seahawks will control things from start to finish. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I think they'll be able to pull away by double digits. Give me the Seahawks 27-13. 2 more games before we get into the primetime showdowns. The Dallas Cowboys versus the Bears, who are 0-2, by the way, under Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. Chicago got absolutely mauled by the Detroit Lions, 52-21. But when you really think about it, the Bears had so many chances to keep this a close game. For the second week in a row, offense gets off to a fast start. They tie the game up at 7-7 because the Lions did get the ball to start the kickoff. They got the ball to start the game. Next drive, Detroit punts the ball. So Chicago has a chance to take the lead, but they go 3 and out. Detroit scores a touchdown on their next possession, and all hell broke loose. Chicago, DeAndre Swift on the next possession, takes a stretch play to the left side, gets the ball punched out. Yet the defense forced the 3 and out. They were able to force a huge stop and get the Bears offense the ball back. Yet they faced 4th down and 1 at their own 36-yard line, in which they decided to sneak the ball up the middle to Caleb Williams. Of all the plays to run on 4th and 1 and your own 36, that's the one you're going to run. They shouldn't have even gone for it in that first place, but didn't even matter because their defense forced a field goal. A 55-yard attempt, and Jake Bates completely shanked it wide to the right. So the Bears offense was given multiple chances by their defense and their special teams to, get back into this ball game, to give them some life and juice. And then the interception of Kirby Joseph happens. And the Detroit Lions from that point on did what they were supposed to do, which was just absolutely bounce back in the best way possible. Jared Goff threw 5 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery had a way better game on the ground than they did last week. They were able to combine for 130 yards. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, who talked a lot of crap last week about, Ben Johnson coming back to Ford Field. They were gonna boo the bleep out of him. And he backs up his talk with 9 catches for 115 yards and a hat-trick performance with 3 touchdowns. So Detroit played absolutely phenomenal. Defensively, they sacked Caleb Williams 4 times. It took until a garbage time touchdown drive just for him to throw for over 200 yards. Not even a touchdown drive, just a garbage time possession in general. And it was exactly the type of game that they needed after, getting embarrassed by the Packers to start the season. Dallas, they were in a more what's the right way to say this? Because I want to give them their props. They won an outstanding back and forth showdown, 40-37, the highest scoring game of the week against the Giants. But oh my goodness, I'm just more mad at the Giants than I am at the Cowboys because New York had so many chances to win that game. But at the end of the day, the Dallas Cowboys, they just made the least amount of mistakes. I'll explain why. Opening drive of the game, James Hudson, the backup tackle for Andrew Thomas, commits 4 penalties on the first 6 snaps, and they're forced to kick a field goal on the opening drive. Yet, New York does not take their foot off the gas. They proved to the Cowboys that they're not going away. They're not going to lay down and die. They're not going to be a doormat. This is not going to be a block. We're going to fight until the very end. And guess what? They did just that. Through the first 45 minutes, they were playing a little bit of keep up, but they were proving to the Cowboys that, yeah, we're not going away. Yet they just made way too many mistakes to, win that football game. The first was that opening drive, but it did not get better from there. The start of the second half was as great of a start as you could ask for. Defense picks off Dak Prescott on the opening drive, and the offense gets the ball back in pristine field position. Yet instead of kicking a field goal to, potentially, increase their lead or, score a touchdown to really drive a stake in their hearts, they decide to go for it on 4th down. And Russell Wilson on 4th and 3, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong here, but I'll figure it out in just a second. Yeah, it got to 4th and 3 at the 10-yard line. Again, you're up 13-10, and you have a chance to go up by 6, or best case scenario, 10 if you score a touchdown. And Russell Wilson sprinted out to the right to nowhere. Nobody was open. There was no design of the play. It fooled nobody. He tried to force a pass in the flat to Cam Scatterbo, and the ball got punched out of his hands. And the reason why I bring this up was because Dallas scored a touchdown right on the next possession. And for a while, it thought, okay, the Cowboys, they're just going to, pull away, and it's just going to be another boring victory. But once the fourth quarter started, both offenses were just absolutely unstoppable. I mean, Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson were torching Kyrie Elam and Trayvon Diggs throughout the entire period. Russell Wilson, after having one of the worst games of his career last week, throws for over 450 yards and 3 touchdown passes, including the go-ahead to Malik Neighbors with only 20 seconds left. At that point, everybody thought that should have been the end of the game, but the Dallas Cowboys, they were not going away. Their offense was just as dynamic. You had Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders having an effective game as a running back tandem. George Pickett scored his first touchdown as a Cowboy. CeeDee Lamb was torching Drew Phillips and, Deonte Banks and having his way with Paulson Adebo. Jake Ferguson made the big catch on the final drive to at least give Brandon Aubrey a chance. And thank goodness that Dallas had him, because a 64-yard attempt, if it were any other kicker, I don't really know if I would have trusted anybody else to, try to win the game. But Brandon Aubrey, the Steph Curry of field goal kickers, saves the day by making the field goal to send the game into overtime. And that was when both defenses really started to tighten up, really started to lock in. And, at one point we thought it was going to be a tie, yet the Giants got the ball back with more than a couple minutes left. They had a chance to still pull off the upset, until Russell Wilson throws a horrific moon ball and an arm punt of an interception to Donovan Wilson. George Pickens gets free for 27 yards on the very next play, and a huge takeoff from Dak Prescott put the ball in way better field position, and Brandon Aubrey made the game-winning field goal to give the Dallas Cowboys a 40-37 victory. So I think the Cowboys are going to win this one. Their offense is slightly more efficient. They're slightly more trustworthy, but I just do not trust their defense whatsoever. Matt Eberflus is returning to Chicago, so that's going to be a very fun revenge game for him. Who knows if, the defense is going to step up big for them, but they are just horrible right now. I mean, the first week, they got blitzed on the ground, and the second week, they give up 400 yards to Russell Wilson of all quarterbacks, and the New York freaking Giants And I would not be surprised whatsoever if this Ben Johnson offense all of a sudden comes to life in the third week and Caleb Williams decides to throw for over 330 yards with 4 touchdown passes. I just won't. But right now, based on what I've seen over the first 2 weeks, I'll believe it when I see it. So I'll say the Cowboys win in the Windy City. Let's say they do it. I'm gonna do it the same score as I did with the Falcons game. I'm gonna say they win 27-17. So let me get back to my my preview page here. Yep, here we go. 27-17. All right, now we're getting into the final 2 games. The Chiefs versus the Giants. Both teams are 0-2, which is absolutely shocking and stunning. But to make a long story short, this is a trap game for the Chiefs. I know that people are going to be like, oh, yeah, the Chiefs are going to win this game easily. But the Chiefs have not won a game at MetLife Stadium ever since their first meetings in 1975. 2017 is the last matchup that, these two teams played each other in that stadium. The Giants won that game 12-9 when they were absolutely terrible. They only had 1 win entering that game. The Chiefs, they were supposed to be one of the premier playoff teams in the league. They started off that season, 5-1 or 6-1, and they fell into one of the worst slumps that you could ask for, and this was as low of a loss as you could ask for. They did manage to, rebound in the final few weeks. They won the division with a 10-6 record. This is what Alex Smith is their quarterback, but Patrick Mahomes is not exactly Alex Smith. So that's probably the one, factor that, is really going to stand out over anything else when it comes to the history of this matchup. I'm not saying that this is going to be a blowout because that this Giants front four can definitely have its way with the Chiefs offensive line that has not proven to be as strong as it was in their dynastic years. Chiefs defense is incredibly undisciplined, but so is the Giants offense. So this is going to be really sloppy. I think this will be really close, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I can't really say that I just can't say that, Patrick Mahomes is, guaranteed to lose to Russell Wilson. I just really don't. I'll be absolutely stunned if that is the case, but, I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win this game, let's say 23-20. And as I'm saying that, I completely forget about this next game, the Arizona Cardinals versus the San Francisco 49ers. This is the last Sunday afternoon matchup. Mac Jones played great, but it was against a pretty crappy Saints defense. What really had me concerned was just how vulnerable their defense was against Spencer Rattler. They gave up 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. Yeah, they did force a huge turnover. Actually, they forced a couple of huge turnovers down the stretch to really save them in the end. But going up against Kyler Murray and James Conner and Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride, they're going to struggle. And if Brock Purdy isn't clear to play this game with the shoulder injury and with the turf toe, then I just don't really know how Mac Jones is going to be able to play exactly the way he did last week when he's going up against a stronger defense with a better pass rush, with a slightly better secondary, and a well-coached group that knows how to take away their, the other team's strengths. You know that Arizona is going to zone in on the run. They're going to try to make Mac Jones or Brock Purdy, whoever's starting at quarterback, make them win the game by themselves. So I think the Cardinals have the advantage because of that. So I say the Arizona Cardinals win 24-20. And now we get to the final game, the Baltimore Ravens versus the Detroit Lions, Monday Night Football. Baltimore managed to beat the Cleveland Browns pretty handedly, 41-17. Thank goodness you didn't choke, even though you were only up by 7 at one point early in the game. Detroit, on the other hand, they also bounced back in the best way possible. 52-21 victory over the Chicago Bears. So one team's going to start 2-1. The other is going to be 1-2. Jared Goff and Lamar Jackson right now currently lead the league in touchdown passes. So that's absolutely fantastic. Lamar Jackson has yet to throw an interception. So he is right now currently having the better season thus far out of the 2 quarterbacks. And having said all of that, I still think that the Baltimore Ravens, they are going to win this game at home. First of all, this is in Baltimore, so they already got the crown on their side. Number 2, Lamar Jackson has not only beaten Jared Goff twice in their only 2 matchups, but has outright demolished him and has put up some of the best numbers of his career against him, whereas Jared Goff has only scored 6 points in the last 2 matchups. I don't think this is going to be a blowout. I don't think that this is going to be one of those games where the Lions just can't get anything right on either side of the ball, but I still believe that this is one where I think the Ravens just make a few more plays down the stretch. And I know that's saying a lot because they've been known to blow a lot of double-digit leads in the fourth quarter, but I just trust them to get things done at home. And I know that this is against a very, very, very tough opponent who's just as well coached, who has an outstanding dynamic offense, and whose defense shares a lot of similarities to Baltimore's. But it really comes down to the quarterbacks for me, and I really trust Lamar Jackson to get it done in the clutch more than I do with Jared Goff. So I'll say the Ravens win 34-31. And with that, we end the episode right here. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. I know that week 4 is going to be one heck of a week to predict, and I just really hope that I get a lot more games right this week. So take care, everyone. We'll see you next week. We'll see you next time, and yeah, have a great rest of your